originally, and I thought maybe I'd missed the day or got the wrong date. Why don't we go ahead and call the Monday, June 2nd meeting of the City Council work session to order. I guess Nader just took off. Why don't we go ahead and get started anyway?
Okay. Mayor Tarter, members of council, the first item on the agenda is a resolution that would state the council's policy guidance to staff when administering potential exemptions to RPA regulations in the case where a property is brought into the RPA because we've daylighted a stream. And council is aware of this because of some citizen comment about expressing the concern about having this new regulatory overlay on their property as a result of the daylighting project on the co-branch in the Howard Herman Stream Valley Park. What is attached in your council packets is the draft policy that is put forward for council's consideration. What our request is that we get feedback on this tonight, and this would be scheduled for May 27th, not this coming Monday, but 3 weeks from now, for council action. Specifically, what this policy does is provides guidance to staff in administering Chapter 35 stormwater of the City Code. And built into Chapter 35 of the CBay, of the Chesapeake Bay regulations, there is a built-in exemption process. And there are criteria by which you give exemptions to the RPA regulations. And what this basically does is provide some findings that will guide staff when we administer applications for exemptions in the future. And I draw on the policy statement. It's a 2-page document, and on the back side of that 2-page document is a chart that lays out essentially a summary of the requirements found in Chapter 35 and what the findings would be in the event that an exemption is requested from a property that's brought into the RPA because of a daylighting project. And specifically, it states under item B that the City Council finds that creating an RPA through daylighting does not create a circumstance that is self-created or self-imposed by the homeowner. So I'd make that clear. And then the second one that I think is key is item D, that the City Council finds that the benefit to water quality afforded when a stream is either restored or daylighted outweighs any subsequent encroachment into the RPA and is therefore not of substantial detriment to water quality. And then it ends with a policy that the Director of Public Works or the Planning Commission will approve any exception to the RPA provisions of Chapter 35 within a portion of an RPA created or extended as a result of a city-sponsored daylighting or stream restoration project if such development meets the findings of this policy. And so we believe that this is a clear statement of direction to staff. With the council, we have vetted this language with the State Office of Water Quality, and they think we're on the right track with this. The council is not able to sort of categorically declare properties grandfathered, but what the council can do is just lay out the policy guidance for staff. This policy, draft policy, has been mailed out to the property owners that are affected, and so they have reviewed it. We have had some face-to-face meetings with some of those property owners. Generally, we are finding that people understand what the intent of this is. They're appreciative of the effort to address their concerns, and they support it. We do have one property owner who is still exploring his options or his household's options and has not yet come to peace with this policy. That's a quick summary of what we're intending to do with this language. Let me stop and ask if there are any questions of it.
Questions? Ms. Oliver?
Can you put B into plain English, please?
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Or give me an example. I just get confused when I read that.
Well, so here's the requirement that a homeowner can't do something on their property to create a self-imposed condition from which they then come back and say, you know, because I did this on my property, I want an exemption from the RPA requirements. So broadly speaking, that's what the code speaks to here. And so this just says what we're trying to address here was not the homeowners doing, it was the city's doing to achieve a water quality benefit. And that's basically what it tries to say. So it was not self-imposed by the homeowner. It's something that the city has done, and therefore we will be pre-inclined to grant exemptions when people come forward with a request for an exemption under the RPA rules.
Normally, just in law, you typically can't get relief from something you created yourself, like at the BZA or other places. So I think what they're saying is sort of categorically, the homeowner didn't create this, which seems obvious anyway. I mean, I'm not sure it needs to be said in some regard, right? Because, I mean, the city is the one that daylighted the property. But I guess that's what it's getting at.
Well, what we tried to do is just go through the code where it's, you know, here are the requirements. If you're going to get an exemption, here are the tests that you need to meet. And so we try to answer those tests categorically to the best extent that we can.
Mr. Z?
What does Chapter 35 say with regard to an appeal process? Is that
The appeals go to the planning commission.
okay?
Other questions? I have to
Just-
say from my, go ahead.
Just a minor point here. The line 5 is you need to clean up the grammar.
Of the resolution proper. Oh, yeah.
Wyatt, I know that we got some comments on this from a property owner. Have you all had a chance to look at that yet?
We have.
And
We believe that one of the things he's asked for is for the city to provide him with the permit to build for whatever he wants to build in the future. And we don't have a mechanism for doing that. So we don't think that the avenue that he has put forward as a potential solution is one that is available to us.
I have to say, I have some concerns about sort of the formality by which we're addressing these things prospectively. It just seems to me to be a bit odd. I understand where we're getting at. I certainly don't want to stick it to anybody who got a stream peeled open in their backyard, you know, through no fault of their own or no action of their own. But at the same time, I'm a little concerned that, you know, we're addressing these things, these prongs of a test, point by point, prospectively, sort of universally for anybody without really any regard to what the specific facts might be in a particular instance, which gives me some pause just as an attorney. I don't know if anyone else feels that way or not. Guess not. It's just me.
I mean, it's ultimately discretionary, right?
It is, and your point's well taken, and it's one that we've wrestled with. The point C is what we point to answer that question, that it's not a complete vacation of everything in Chapter 35. There is still judgment that the City Council finds that this requirement, well, item C is the exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. And so the finding would be the City Council finds this requirement is met if the Director of Public Works determines that the applicant has made reasonable attempt to minimize the impact on the RPA for an otherwise allowable use. So, for instance, if there's one place to put a garage that has maximum impact on the RPA, but another place on their property to put a garage that would have minimal impact on the RPA, what we believe this tells the director to say work with them to try to minimize the impact and come out with the best possible solution. It does not give carte blanche to just do whatever you want in the RPA. There still is a process that you have to go through. But it simply tries to say that, we recognize that this regulatory regime is coming about because of the daylighting project.
I actually agree with you reading this the first time through, but then that's why I asked the question about appeal. So this lays out the points that have to be addressed in the event that goes to planning. Planning needs to address these points as well to see whether, in fact, the consideration was equity was equal on both sides, and then if it gets appealed, I presume then the BZA would hear this thing, and they would ask what were the points on which the decision was made, so.
I'm trying to recall, but I believe that the BZA would not be involved in this
Goes to court.
No, so then it would go to court directly after planning.
Interesting.
Okay,
Maybe
does
we don't
anyone-
have enough language in here.
Sure.
Can you just walk me through a for instance of, say I live here at 215 South Lee Street.
Mhm.
The RPA has gone through, and we decide we want to put an addition on our house. What would the process be different to get permits than it would be if you lived up at 207 South Lee Street? What's the difference in the process that we're creating for the people that now live in the RPA?
The difference is that they will need to get the exemption. And so there is a form that you have to fill out for that exemption for the RPA regulations and a justification for it. And that would be true, anybody can apply for an exemption. And you need to be able to justify why you're getting that exemption. What this policy does, though, is give staff basically a nudge, an inclination to say, give this application for an exemption the benefit of the doubt, because they wouldn't be regulated at all if it had not been for the daylighting project. One of the philosophies behind this policy is today they can put that detached garage or that larger house in the RPA because there is no RPA on that land. And so they can do that. And so the point of this policy is that would it be better to have that garage in the backyard without the daylight stream, or would it be better to have it with the daylight stream? And given the fact that we think that there are other opportunities throughout the city to do some daylighting, we think daylighting is a very positive thing to do for water quality, but the RPA issue is powerful enough that it could really give rise to strong opposition to daylighting streams. And so we're trying to, with this policy, provide a vehicle to address those concerns so we can do the water quality benefit at a minimal impact to the adjacent property owners.
So if someone is trying to do development on their house, how much time is this going to add to the process? How many other critical points are there along the way where they might be told no?
Time, I don't think it'll be significantly longer because any of these projects in the city would require, any major project of the type we're talking about would require a CBERT hearing and the full water quality assessment and all those steps that any developer has to jump through today. This just has the additional aspect of that exemption process.
And will that be in the same office, the exemption
Yes.
process?
Mhm.
So staff will be able to help people through that?
Yes, it would all be in the Department of Public Works.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, why don't we move on to the next item? It seems like there's not much opposition to this, and it sounds like everyone.
So we'll continue to work it and refine it, and then bring it to council on May 27th.
Thank you. Sure, of course.
So if I'm looking at that map, what we're talking about is writing a policy that applies to those homeowners who are now within the area, rather than anyone that's in the existing area? Or is this applying to everybody in both the current and existing?
It really applies to the people who would be affected by the green lines, which is where the new RPA will go.
Okay, so those couple houses on Sharrow and the ones on Lee.
Mm-hmm.
But the folks that are already in the RPA, they don't have any options or choices. They weren't able to do anything before and they're not able to do anything now?
That's correct. They can go through the process and ask for exemptions and things like that today, but there's no change to their status with this policy.
Okay, why don't we move on to the next item?
The school board has formally requested that the council adopt an ordinance to approve a bond referendum this coming November for the Mount Daniel Elementary School expansion. This is a $15.6 million project that's approved in the CIP. And so the purpose of this discussion tonight is to make sure the council is aware of the request, to provide a model for an ordinance that the council adopted with the last time we had a school bond referendum, which was for the Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School, which was not so named at the time that the ordinance was adopted. But what we will be doing is working with the school board and the city attorney, interim city attorney, to draft up a new ordinance that would authorize the sale of these bonds contingent upon approval by referendum, and it would be modeled on this earlier ordinance. And so we wanted to bring it to the council's attention and let you be aware of the scheduling requirements for this. It really should be adopted by mid-July, so that we'll have about 4 weeks to get to the circuit court to get the judge to bang the gavel and order it to be on the ballot.
Questions?
Do we have to wait that long?
I think to have the ordinance drafted correctly, we need to have the earliest we could do that is May 27th, and so that would be first reading, and then second reading would be July 14th. So that's as quickly as we could do it.
Other questions? I have one. In the actual resolution, it says the total project cost is not to exceed $15.6 million. What's the implications of that? I mean, for example, let's say it costs $15.8 million, there's a $200,000 overrun.
That's in the school board.
Yeah, it's resolution
Resolution.
05-14.
I think that's a good question, and I think one thing we want to avoid doing is so tying our hands that if we have, sometimes there are change orders that are not because of bad management, but because of a desired thing that came up in the planning process. So I think we would possibly want to give ourselves some leeway there, but we'll need to strike the right balance by having the proper discipline on the project as well.
Mr. Baruch?
Just one point that, if y'all remember, we're, I believe, under certain guidelines for how we speak about referendums, pro and con, and information that we can put out. I think it would be good, given that we've got some new council members, to refresh our memories about what we can and can't do in that front.
Good point. Anything else on this? Anyone? Okay. Why don't we go ahead and move on? I think the next item is actually, well, we got council comments and schedule. Before we get on to any comments that might be here, I wonder if we could all send our vacation time or out of the office schedules to Wyatt, just so we kind of have a collecting point for, we're going to be on vacation the week of this, the week of that, so we can try to schedule things for as many people being here as possible. It's just, maybe just to Wyatt the next couple of days, if you could think of it, when you're going to be out of the area or unable to attend hearings. Mr. Baruch?
So on that front, I think Wyatt has my vacation plans for the summer. So I'll be out on the 16th and 17th, back on the 18th in the city.
So that's one thing I think we should talk a little bit about. I know you had desired to be in the walking tour of the downtown area plan, which would probably necessitate moving it to a later day that week, unless you have any other ideas, Mr. Shields, on when to accommodate that.
That was going to be the main aspect of that work session. The other items are things I think we can cover very quickly.
So, but would that would essentially be moving the work session from Tuesday to, when do you get back?
I'm back Wednesday.
So it could occur on Wednesday, but I guess that would beg the question, is everyone here available on the 18th to have it if we moved it to a different date? And maybe that doesn't need to be answered right now, but if we could maybe send that information, the availability that week, to Mr. Shields in addition to your vacation plan, so we could try to figure out a day when we can get as many folks here as possible.
Or one other option would be moving it to the July 17th work session too.
The when?
17th. Or I'm sorry, 7th.
7th of July. Yeah, and that would mean kicking off the approval as well for, I mean, I'd like to keep this thing moving.
I agree.
But anyway, why don't we hear from everyone about your availability that week for moving the work session, possibly the walking tour, to a later date that week, and then also what days you're not available during the summer, so we can try to get as many people at the meetings as we can. Other comments? Council comments, questions, requests? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to thank the manager for his response to my ask about police presence at the Steve Sprague funeral on Saturday. They were able to be present and to escort the folks who were going from church to cemetery with motorcycles and vehicles, and helped create good order during that process. Thank you. Second, could you have the code enforcement folks run by West End Shopping Center and see if they've managed to pick up the enormous pile of trash which is gathered at the dumpsters over the past week? I did not look today, but as of yesterday, there was a pile in violation of health and good order. Thanks.
Mr. Baruch?
And just on code issues, Mr. Shields, just thought in reference to the one particular concern that came in from a city residents about the same shopping center on the backside and what looked like boarded up, possibly windows. And just to make council aware, I've raised to Wyatt and to Cindy a public safety issue that I've asked them to look at that don't necessarily involve city services per se. Before I talk about it publicly, I'd like Wyatt and Cindy to do a little bit more looking into that before I start discussing it publicly.
Okay.
And give the affected entities that may be involved an opportunity to self-correct before I say anything publicly. And if any council members are interested in what I'm talking about, I'm happy to talk to you offline, but I'd rather let folks try to resolve it. And again, it doesn't involve the city per se. So, and I can talk to folks offline about that. But I'd want if we can just get moving on that front.
Yes.
And make the appropriate contacts.
Okay, Mr. Z.
We have until June the 18th to apply for the Climate and Energy Leadership Award, the COG Award. They give it to 3 jurisdictions of different sizes. We, of course, would qualify for the little one. So I am working with the ESC and Wyatt, meeting with the entity that has to submit on this Friday. And so if anyone has objection to doing this, should let me know. If we ought to proceed, we ought to know, because the ESC is waiting with bated breath for our answer on whether they should proceed or not. So everyone seems to be nodding yes. So we'll proceed with that. I might add that COG is eager to recognize a jurisdiction that hasn't been named an EPA Green Power Community, so that's a plus in our favor. Second, what is the process going forward on the update to the work plan that we talked about? Did I miss an email with the revisions, or is that going to be brought forward as a completed product, or what's the next step on that?
I will send out tomorrow the updates that has the comments from the work session, and then from there we just need to schedule the follow-up discussion on it.
Okay, great. And lastly, moving on to the Sublime, Mayor Beth Connolly and I talked about, from a communication perspective, the need for a new banner. So I'll let her say more about that. And but before she does, let me just ask you, what's the status on the Pennsylvania and Broad signal light?
It's under construction. We expect that over the coming, I think, 2 months, the poles will be installed. We did have one change order for the poles. One of the poles was located directly in the middle of a sidewalk. And we said that's not acceptable, and so that required a different length of mast arm, et cetera, but that is one of the reasons why there's some delay.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Conley?
Keep adding up. Okay, the banner. After the Memorial Day Parade, Mr. Z and I were discussing that the City Council banner could maybe use an update. We're not quite sure how to go about that, but it's looking a little tired. Needs a
The farmer's market banner?
Is that the farmer's market banner?
Which is it?
No,
which
no, no,
one
the
are you
banner
talking
that
about?
we carried in the parade, that the city council
Oh,
carried in the
all right,
parade.
okay.
Um,
Thing I call the ugly green thing.
Yeah, it just needs a little update. But really, it should say, welcome to Falls Church, right? Since we're going to go with welcome to Falls Church, I think the banner should say that. And
With the little city logo on it.
there you go. And I'm happy to work with anybody who is working on that banner.
All right, great.
Ms. Oliver?
No, I have three more things. Sorry. White, from Planning Department, are they going to give us a June update on the substandard lot subdivision processes?
We will do that.
Okay.
Mhm.
We got an update that there were 4 lots, and then Jim Snyder told me there's a 5th one that's come in, and so I'd like to know where we are on that. And then Phil Duncan and I, as well as 2 staff here, started to do interviews for our new clerk today, and we will be interviewing this week, and hopefully next week and the week after we will be able to do second interviews with the whole council. That's all.
Ms. Oliver?
Looking at the work plan here, we have resolution establishing a GMHSMEH, whatever, Development Steering Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering whether we would see the final report with the Gantt chart before that time or with that resolution. I'd like to just take a look at that and see the resolution, as early as possible.
We do have a meeting this Thursday to, well, the goal of it is to incorporate the comments that we have received. The school board, I think, had a number of comments and review the final report with those changes. And so we'll distribute what it looks like after that upcoming meeting.
Okay. And all are welcome to that as well. If you'd like to attend, feel free to. You don't have to stay. If you'd like. Any other comments? Sure.
Did you work out who's going to staff the Thursday transportation meeting? Does anyone need to? I just got an email today from the executive director as if somebody is expected to go.
Yeah, the NVTC meeting is really not a regular meeting. It's a legislative committee meeting and then a VRE audit committee meeting. So if anyone can attend, please do. I'm out on business travel. There's also an NVTA Finance Committee meeting on Friday, but during the day. So I'm not sure that's anything that any city council member can attend. I would say the NVTC meeting is unusually voluntary.
One more. Mr. Duncan, if the June 17th work session is moved to June 18th so that the walking tour is available to all, will the budget committee meet then?
I don't know. Unfortunately, my computer with its calendar crashed today, so I have no aptitude about what I'm doing in June. Was that the?
I thought the budget was that. I thought that was the 4th Tuesday.
I thought it was the next Tuesday. It's the
Right,
fo-
but we had attendance problems on that next Tuesday.
Oh. Okay.
Oh,
All right.
that's right. Okay. Well, I don't know the answer to that.
We'll follow up by email and get that scheduled.
Okay, is there anything else?
Sure, Dave.
Mr. Vice Mayor Snyder?
Thanks a lot. Following up on transportation, there are 2 initiatives going on regionally. The first is to request the federal government to get going on the highway surface transportation funding, and it's not just highways, it's transit. And secondly, a letter will go shortly from NVTA to the governor and hopefully the General Assembly commenting on potential dangers to transportation projects in Northern Virginia if there's no budget past the new fiscal year. There's a risk that the money might stop and that projects would stop along with it. So NVTA is working on a letter to that effect. I wanted to alert everybody. And then, secondly, in terms of general work, I want to make sure that we're fleshing out all the potential options for use of the water sale proceeds so that the next time the council picks this up, we can hopefully get to a decision point. At least a decision point so that we can then get community input, but based upon fleshed out options. So I know that work is going on and just urge it to continue. Yesterday, the Village Preservation and Improvement Society held a great program with two really good parts. The best part were Mary Beth Conley and Karen Oliver discussing city issues and the fun that they've had so far with us. And then also an interesting concept called cottage development, where you have a series of smaller buildings and much smaller building envelopes on the same property, and you share common areas. So it's probably worth some thinking about. Maybe the Planning Commission might want to take a look at that in the future. And then real local stuff. I had a citizen on Maple Avenue want to know about a street light, so I can get with you on that. So those are the issues I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything else, I think we'll go into closed session then. I'm sorry for all of you here to maybe hear more, but that's it for tonight as far as public hearing goes. We are now going to go into closed session. If you're here for a matter, please, you're welcome to stay. If you're not, unfortunately, you'll have to leave. Let's go ahead, and upon a motion made by council member,
Duncan?
Oliver.
I'll take Duncan, seconded by council member
Connolly.
Connolly, and passed by a voice vote of city council. Council went into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia for the discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body. Roberts Park expansion, TJ School expansion, and pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, discussion of prospective candidates for employment of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, city attorney recruitment. Councilmember Baruch?
Yes.
Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Councilmember Duncan?
Yes.
Councilmember Oliver?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Snyder?
Yes.
Councilmember Z?
Yes.
Councilmember Tartar? Okay. All right, so again, if any of you are here for a matter to be heard in the closed session, at least the park section, please stay. Otherwise, we'd ask you to leave.